Well, welcome everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first Senate session of fall term. I hope everyone, we were noticing that you were looking at the agenda and then you disappeared.
I came too soon.
I hope everyone enjoys the gift I brought to you, which is your name tag now says where you're from. So that was one of the requests at the end of the term. So someone said, nice for signs. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Before we do the minutes, I did want to make a quick introduction. As you know, we don't have cookies or fruit anymore, but with the money saved, we got to give a student a great professional experience. So I've hired an administrative assistant for the Senate, so she'll be helping all of us in a sense. That is Sarah Gunther back here.
Yay, welcome.
Sarah is a senior double major in political science and criminal justice. She is a Raider ambassador and operations lead at the recreation center. So she has a great history of excellent employment at SOU. And she'll be, Chad is going to be training her to take over the video and web stuff in a lot of ways. And also just sort of helping us keep organized in all the many documents that flow through this file. So very happy to have her with us.
Andrew?
Yes.
She's also a clarinet player.
Whoa.
That's right, I forgot to say music minor.
Minor in music?
Yeah, maybe we can have you play live music in the All right, with that, any notes on the minutes, or do we have a motion to approve the minutes from June 3rd of last year?
I move to approve the minutes from June 3rd of last year.
Do we have a second? All right, Brian? Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes from June 3rd, please indicate so. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes, I wasn't here.
Okay, that's good.
Retracting your vote.
I was also not here.
Okay.
Chad, obviously standing away. You're abstaining.
Say what now?
Oh,
You're
I'm
abstaining.
Oh, no. I'm all for it.
Oh,
All right, the minutes are, first up, we have President's Report.
Thank you, Andrew. And those of you who are at-large senators, I just want you to know when I first looked at your signs with my failing eyes, I thought it said extra large.
More and more as time goes on.
Okay.
Sounds like something you did.
So it's great to see everybody back. I hope things are off to a good start. I've just got a few items. First of all, and Sue can keep me straight on this. I was reviewing, I had to review the bylaws revisions that you all did. And when I did that, I noticed that the second part of Article 1, not anything else, just like the second half of Article 1, is nowhere close to reflecting the reality of our university anymore. So I asked advisory council and they agreed that the VPs are gonna each go through that, and we're just gonna try to bring it back to you updated so that it at least reflects reality. And then we can have conversation going forward about other changes that we might want to make. I know some of you have heard me talk about wanting to have a conversation about shared governance, and especially around how to make sure we have representation for our staff members on campus. So we'll think about those things. But the first step is let's at least get it to look like what we are actually doing and who we have and stuff like that. So we'll be working on that. They've committed to doing that by November 1st. So, second, I just wanted to mention, in case you don't know, that the Higher Education Coordinating Commission will be meeting on our campus this Wednesday. They have not been on our campus in several years, so we're very pleased that Lee and her colleagues will be here If you've never been to a HEC meeting and you just want to see what they're like and get to meet some of the commissioners, come on by. It'll be in the Road River Room Wednesday afternoon. The general meeting starts at 2:30. There's a facilities meeting earlier that day, but the general meeting is at 2:30, and there'll be public comment and all sorts of merriment. Right, Lee?
Absolutely.
And then we'll be hosting them that evening, so Sherry and David Humphrey and others are helping us sort of show them around a little bit, JPR, theater, science, and then we'll be having dinner over in the library. And I think Chad is gonna show us a little bit of stuff, and we'll have some students featured as well. So anything we can do to help them understand more about our campus and really see it. They're commissioners who have never been here. So we want them to have a really good impression and be impressed by the good work that we're doing here. Third, I hope you've received information on the conference on creating seamless and future-ready education in Southern Oregon that we're hosting here on October 22nd and 23rd. It would be great if you can attend either of those 2 days, but the one that's really focused for faculty is the second day, the 23rd from 9 to 12. And it's really going to be these folks from the Knowledge Works Foundation talking about what they're seeing and how education is changing around the country, particularly in K through 12, and talking about personalized education, what that means, fielding criticism, but also talking about what they've learned about it and what they think we need to know about it. So it's a great chance to hear from folks who really are working all over the country. And I encourage you to register and come to one or both days. I know it's a lot of time commitment. The first day is really more, we're having employers, we're having K through 12 educators, and that one is also going to be very interesting because it's about what they see as the future. And if you weren't here 2 years ago when we had the futurist come, or you didn't get to hear him, this is their futurist, and particularly how they think the changes that they see in the future will challenge all of us in education. What do we need to do? What do we need to be thinking about for our students to get them ready for this brave new future that's rapidly headed our way? So happy to have as many of you there as can make it. And if you can't come for the whole thing, you can come for a couple of hours. You're welcome to just do that. And finally, I'll be sending out a memo probably tomorrow, so this is your heads up on it. We still don't have final enrollment numbers. Head count has improved some. We're now down by about 1.5% in head count, but we're still down over 4% in SCH. So that's mainly returning students. Not returning, continuing students. New students are up, graduate students are up, but it's that continuing student. We, have things in work. You guys are all doing things around this. What it means in the short term, and I've resisted this since I've been president, but we will have to make budget reductions this year. We've eaten into our reserves as we've waited for things to take hold. They are taking hold, but we still have a problem. So I'll be announcing a 3% across the campus reduction. Our priorities are maintaining academic excellence and maintaining and enhancing service to students that ensures their success. We'll be trying to take as many of those reductions as we can out of operations, right? So you've heard me say before, I want to protect our academic and student serving core as much as possible. Can't protect it entirely, but it is the priority. So each vice president has a target to achieve to help us get to this reduction. And they will work with their teams and everybody to figure out what's the best way. This is grounded in the philosophy that people who are on the ground doing the work know best where we can take the reductions with the least amount of damage. So I don't like having to do it, and we are trying to be as thoughtful as we possibly can. One thing we've already done is scrutinized our list of positions. And we found that in some places there were lines budgeted and nobody's been in that line for a few years. It's easy in an organization of this size for those kinds of things to creep in. So we're going through and looking at every one of those. Is this one we can say we really don't need anymore? Is it one that can stay open for 6 months and that saves us a bit of money? So, you know, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of very detailed, precise work, but I think it's the right work to be doing. We don't want to reduce anything that we don't absolutely have to. So that's the short term for this year. Long term, I'm gonna be forming a presidential task force on financial sustainability because we all have to together do this work to look at longer term changes. But we're gonna buy this year with the short-term reductions and then think about, and see what happens over the coming year, right? It could be that enrollment picks up. Could be that we have a recession. When we have a recession, enrollment goes up. Unfortunately, often state funding goes down. So we have to just stay flexible, you know. I don't want to make any hard and fast decisions and then have things change on us. So this is the way we're approaching it at this point. And we believe we can get there without any drastic changes. So I'm sure, and just to say, I know there will be questions. We will be coming around. We're asking every division director to have a meeting where I and the VPs can come and just meet with faculty and other employees in each division to answer any questions, to give you more information. Our goal is for you to understand as much of this as you want, because the more you understand it, I believe the more you will help us, right? And also just see we're not trying to hide anything. We need your good thinking about it all. So, any quick questions?
So we'll just note that Greg has been preemptively invited to come present the budget to Senate once it is approved by the board, which is that meeting is when?
Yes, October 18th.
Okay, so Greg will come into the next Senate meeting after that, just to give us an overview of what our budget looks like.
And I'm sending this announcement out tomorrow, but nothing will be final or tomorrow or the next day until the board actually approves the budget and all they're approving is a certain level of reduction. It's not in any particular lines or places at this point because that's what everybody will figure out over the next couple of months or so. You're welcome.
Just brief, I want to piggyback on what the president said about the enrollment piece. You know, it's great that new student numbers are up. That means that we've made some good changes in the recruiting processes the last couple of years. Our problem is continuing to be retention. So the things that we've put into place and starting to implement in the next upcoming year will be critical to that effort. We have a retention problem and we need to try to figure out our best pathway. And I will also say that we've changed the way in which we're looking at financial aid distribution in a more effective way, managing leveraging more around financial aid packages for students and the timing of that. So I think that's going to help both for new students and also returning and continuing students. I just came from Klamath Falls with some of my colleagues. Katie and Robin were there, Sherry, Clay, Matt Stillman, Andrew, and I'm sure I'm missing someone, to meet with the SOHAC folks, so Southern Oregon Higher Ed Consortium. The enrollment and student affairs and academic affairs folks all met So we talked a lot about some nice collaborations that we are getting excited about. So had a good meeting, and we got lots done after you left.
Because
What did she say? So that's it. And more to come on that. You'll hear more.
Okay, so it is customary for the chair-elect to tell you what happened or interesting nuggets, I suppose, from the advisory council meeting, which was last week. And pleasantly, President Schott and Ms. Walsh covered most of those. You know, our primary task is to set the Senate agenda, decide where things would go on, and then any other issues that would come up. We did set the agenda. You have the agenda in front of you. I'm not going to comment a lot on that. I wanted to highlight one thing that President Schott led with, which is in case you weren't clear about what she was talking about, one of the main parts that is out of date and needs cleanup and clarification is what we used to call the President's Committees. Sort of, the Senate committees are pretty clearly laid out, but the President's Committees are got a lot of what she's talking about, and some of the position titles and organizational things. So we talked a little bit about that. See here. I did want to say that President Schott, aren't you going to give a state of the university address? It's in November. I think we talked about that. So I think there'll be other things obviously sooner than that. You can hear it Senate about budget and so on. There'll be I have the date in front of me and I've lost it. Is it November 14th? So we, yeah, November 14th.
I'll find it.
I think that's, I finally found it.
Okay. State of the
Yeah.
University.
State of the University will,
3:30.
3:30 and more on that eventually, but since we know that, we'll tell you that too. And then two other things that came up that, because this was our first meeting of the year, we talked not only about what should we put on this meeting's agenda, but just kind of to remind all of us of the things that we sort of had tasked for the year. And so we did talk quite a bit about that. We have several task forces going right now, and some of those are going to be addressed on our agenda today. But it occurred to me, and I sort of took notes on, there are several things that are going to end up funneling to the Constitution Committee this year in one way or another. We have a task force on, for example, post-tenure review and post-promotion review. We have a task force on FPARs. We have a task force, and I know we're going to talk about it today, on Gen Ed. We have a task force that's going to try to align the bylaws with the collective bargaining agreement. Goodness, we had, then there's several issues related to program chairs and how we elect them and the schedule for that. And some of those will have some, so the elections committees will be probably making some recommendations on bylaws this year. So those are things kind of just put it out there so you sort of have a sense of the lieu of things. One thing we talked about that hasn't been raised yet, and that was just a general frustration on all of our parts about evaluations of vice presidents and directors and so forth. And I don't know that we actually came up with any brilliant solutions, but we just kind of mentioned that, you know, that's something that we'd like to see more participation in, find a way for people to get good feedback to our leaders. Because right now it feels to President Schott and to Provost Walsh at least, a lot like it's a sort of a complaint board where, you know, all you hear is the people that are really unhappy, and maybe a couple of 3 people that are happy, and nothing much in between. So anyway, we didn't really build an action plan, but we did talk about it and express that, hey, this is something that we'd love to see be better. So if anybody has any brilliant ideas, do let us know. I think that's all I had that we didn't, it's already going to be on the agenda now, or will be eventually in some future meeting.
That's all right. All right, with that, I'm very pleased to welcome and introduce Suresh Appavu, our new Chief Diversity Inclusivity Officer. Suresh wanted to come and just introduce himself to all of you, but also wanted to speak a little bit about a really important requirement for our university, HB 2864, which most of you should have taken a look at. So, Suresh, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me into the Senate, Faculty Senate, and giving me this time to bring to your attention something that we were all kind of mandated to participate in. And that is the Oregon State requirement for all public institutions, educational institutions, and its employees and students to be able to not only demonstrate cultural competence, but also show growth and development over it, over periods of time that we are supposed to report biannually to the state about. And the first report is due this December, and that report will include essentially a plan for moving forward. And part of the proposal that I wanted to make and request your cooperation with is really about, first of all, doing a baseline diversity climate survey of the campus that includes students, faculty, staff, and administration, and quite possibly also members of the board. Based upon which we will then have a baseline to compare data as we move forward doing the things that we plan to be doing. And the model that I have suggested that we utilize, and I've presented broadly about this to the General Education Task Force as well, is a model that I would like to call intersectional cultural capacity rather than competency, which is slightly difficult to measure. Particularly when it comes to cultural competency, because it's hard to measure whether somebody is 50% culturally sensitive or not, as the case may be. So capacity usually indicates the possibility of being able to build the capacity and also being able to show growth over time. And so the idea is to have this particular process, and I have identified several skills under that, or several capacities as the case may be under that. And I can share with you a more full presentation provided that would be helpful for everybody. The key difference that makes Southern Oregon University distinctive in this process would be to understand that one of the capacities that we will put forth is about sustainability and environmental action. That's not been actually presented with a model of intersectionality so far, and that is one of the pieces of one of the capacities that I think would make us very, very different compared to perhaps other institutions that are in Oregon, and that fits very much with our, let's say, aspirations towards environmental sustainability actions at the university, and to carry forward some of the recognition we've enjoyed from the last year. In addition to that, I have talked briefly with Andrew about the course evaluations process, and having been a tenured faculty member and a dean for diversity and equity at the last institution I was at, the course evaluations process was something we just got passed about a year and a half ago. So I'm very fresh after an almost 6-year process through which that happened, with working with different aspects of the entire faculty. So I'm happy to share that particular model. It is a model that I believe has not actually been thought about before at most institutions of higher education, especially because it includes a very specific section on educating and training our students to complete course evaluations in a way that would be useful. Which typically higher education has not done in terms of training students on how to be able to do that, even though the stakes for it are usually very high for faculty members. Now, part of the reason for also doing that is I have to confess a little bit of an agenda where how we measure cultural competency can therefore also be somewhat painless if it becomes part of the evaluative process. And so that way it addresses issues with collecting data. For academic program reviews, there are tiers in which faculty can select things. The institution can select things, both at the course level and at the promotion review and tenure level, and so on. So if you're further interested, I think I'm going to meet with the task force as well soon, so I can present it to them, and then I will they can sort of discuss it and bring it forward if that is the case. And my role is merely to show that here is a model. That's pretty much it. And then how you want to do that is really up to you. And I can probably help with some of the issues that might come up since I've been through this for almost 6 years. Apart from that, I also wanted to offer any services that you might require in terms of curriculum and so on, because we just redid our GE, as I shared yesterday, with the GE task force as well. Last week, on Friday, I should say. And if there are particular things that you are looking at or interested in the majors or in the GE, I'm more than happy to help and go through with that. I have lots of resources to help you with that as well. Other than that, I just thought I'd give you some time to ask any questions you might have of me. So, please.
It's a shy group.
They're in Shiloh. Well, I will just, I want to testify to the, Suresh and I met the other day, and you know, I'm currently with Digital Cinema in the process of looking at what our learning outcomes will be for assessment, and we had a really fruitful conversation about, you know, how do you go about assessing in a film and media program, diversity and equity, and Suresh had lots of great ideas, and I found it really useful. So I think it'd be a great idea if anyone's looking at their outcomes and trying to figure out how to assess that, bring them into the program.
I did have a digital presentation for you, but since the media was not on, I thought I'd refrain from actually taking up time to plug in the flash drive, because I've learned that it takes a little bit of time for the computers to boot up if you've not actually gotten on them. So,
If you want to send it, I can always put it in.
yeah, I'll send it out to you. And so there are some explanations I've provided, some key points that you might want to take a look at as well. That might give you a little bit more context. I'm more than happy to come and explain some of those things at a later time if you're interested and have the information and you would like to indulge me. So thank you again very much for your time.
All right, next, another introduction. We have the new director of the Honors College, Chasey Morgan.
Hi, thanks for having me. I also wanted to come by and introduce myself. I'm the new director of the Honors College and really excited to be here. I was really attracted by this university, the mission, the size, and particularly the kinds of things that the honors program and college provides students. My background is in history, public history. I ran a master's program in social science and globalization at the university I was at previously. I also helped write the strategic plan for the university, covering the community engagement aspect. I was on the committee that rewrote our GE program, moving from semesters to quarters. Also on the GE assessment team that rewrote our assessment for conversion from semesters to quarters, or from quarters to semesters. Yeah.
Different direction there.
What was that?
We're not doing
Yeah. Well, we said that too for years. Also co-directed the Center for Faculty Development, working with research, teaching, and community engagement. And in my undergraduate experience, couldn't make up my mind, I was in piano performance, studied environmental science and development and policy, went to nursing school, and then settled on history. So the reason why I say all of this is I have an institutional experience. I wanted to meet you as a group because I expect that there might be opportunities for me to bring things before you, small little changes we want to make to streamline things in the Honors College, as well as when I work with your students, I want you to know that I have some basis to work with students from across the university. I had a great conversation with a student who's working on a project to investigate kidney stones in goats, and I proposed a formula that she might use to analyze her data, and she's like, yes! So that's really fun for me to be able to use all of these diverse experiences that I have and to work with such a great Honors College population. Two of them are priorities in addition to continuing what is working so amazingly well about college. Two of the priorities are to diversify the student population. I'm doing that through a thoughtful and deliberate recruiting campaign. I'm reserving one slot for a student that comes from one of the 9 Oregon tribes, and then working with our Raiders, Bulldogs, and Hornets to, is that right?
Yeah.
Pirates, Raiders, yeah.
Pirate.
To Raiders program, and doing some really sustained, deliberate outreach with the Latino communities. So those 2 initiatives are well underway, and I think is going to have a great impact on connecting us with the community in really meaningful ways. The last thing is to identify any barriers that are impeding student admission, recruiting, and also student success in the program. And so that's where I'm asking all of you, if you have anything that you've observed over the years, and I know Andrew, you still need to talk, what we can do to streamline things in a way that continues to uphold our high standards for our students and their unique experience in Honors College, but then also might help them have success in less frustrating ways. I look to you to suggest those to me, reach out to me if you've noticed things or if you're seeing things and haven't really had the time to reach out and talk to anybody about how we might fix that. I'd really appreciate your input. We moved back to Susie Hall. We're going to be having some events coming up. In a couple of weeks, Prakash is going to be talking about the Democracy Project. So if any of you are interested, I hope that you will come and hear the presentation and consider coming to the UK with us to study democracy in Edinburgh and in London. And we're going to have some other events as well. 3 of the most exciting ones I want to just briefly tell you about, then I'm going to add it to the events calendar for the university. Laz Ayala is going to come and give us a sneak peek of his documentary about his experience coming to the United States undocumented and what he sees as the pressing need of migration and undocumented workers and our local employers today. The second person is Chizu Amori. She's a Japanese-American activist and documentary filmmaker. She's coming in January to talk about her experience working on the committee of the Tule Lake Committee and some of the things that are happening and still within the community today that stem from World War II events that are continuing to break apart communities today. And then Roy Saigo is coming on February 19th to speak for the Day of Remembrance and again about Japanese American history and its impact on our understanding of world events today. So exciting events. Please reach out to me if you have any comments. Thank you for having me.
All right, now a man who needs no applause.
Really, I don't.
That's what
Probably won't get any either.
Dale is here as one of the 2 co-chairs. Aaron Wilder, the other co-chair, could not make it today, but representing the Transforming General Education Task Force. We just thought it would be a good idea for Dale to sort of introduce a little bit of what the task force is going to be doing. As a reminder, I've added 3 special Senate sessions this year, one at the end of each term, where those are dedicated for the General Education Task Force to present and discuss with Senate. So we really are working on a very open process. Also, related to that, one of the things Sarah's going to be helping us do with the website is add a landing page for the task force where we can be communicating with the full community about things that the task force is working on. So Dale, take it away.
So I think a good segue is always in order for anything. So I want to invite you to our committee. Since, I mean, you're not there and there's no one from Honors, so I think, this is like a formal introduction, but you can turn it down, but I think it would be excellent because of your experience to join our committee if you would like. We have a locked-in time of 2 to 4 o'clock on Fridays if you're available at that time. If you're not available at that time, you can't play. Because we found that was the only time that worked for 99% of us. So we're trying to keep that together. So as a group, we met as a small group over the summer and a larger group for 2 times now. And the smaller group was just trying to get a layout of the land and try to come up with a timeline that we were going to attempt to work with. The big timeline is a 2-year timeline because we figured CREAC, when they did it way back when, like 2003 or 4, whenever that was, that they took about 3 years to do it, but they didn't have the PLC running ahead of them. So we figured we've done a lot of the research, especially externally, and now some of the research is really about trying to get internal kinds of information. And Aaron and Andrew and I worked together online over last weekend to come up with a list of ideas that we could send to faculty to get some more interaction with faculty about what we're doing. And so we sent something, and I really feel it's important at this point to look around the table to all the different departments that are represented here, to please encourage you to go back to your departments and look at the request that we sent you for feedback on the outcomes. And we were not looking for feedback about what's working with general ed and some of the things like that. We were really trying to focus in on the basic outcomes that we are, not, I shouldn't say outcomes because they're the learning goals that we have, the 9 learning goals. And of course there are outcomes and proficiencies beneath each one of those. But we were trying to stay up at that level. And so there's different levels. There's the 3,000-foot level, which is looking at all the things right and wrong with general education. And it's very, very tempting to just get sucked into the vortex of everything that's wrong. And we were trying to focus in on trying to make things right. And one of the ways we were trying to look at the outcomes with 3 basic things. What's there that's working, what is not working, and what's missing completely. And we would say, you know, just offhand, right off the bat, you could say creativity is missing because it's in there sort of under the critical thinking, but it's, you know, not as explicit as we would like. And then the other big conversation we've kind of had, and I've had it with the chairs meeting too, I presented this idea that we created a gen ed or a university studies model that was outcome based. And I went around the room in the chairs meeting and I said, what are the 3 basic exploration outcomes? And I would ask you, how many people know what the 3 basic exploration outcomes are? You raise your hand or not, it doesn't matter. Neither do the students. You know what they are? Social science, science, and humanities. That should sort of roll off of our tongue as something that's basic. If we're doing that, why do we think of it in terms of courses? Because the student thinks in terms of courses, we think in terms of courses, our transfer model thinks in terms of courses, but we have a model that's working off of outcomes. We ask you to submit courses and define your outcomes, and they're lost. No one can speak to our outcomes, so we don't have that mixed into our basic lexicon at the university. And that is part of our problem with our gen ed model. So we're asking all the departments to look at those outcomes that are there, or our learning goals, and then further down the outcomes, and tell us what ones are working, what ones are not working, and what needs to be added that's not there now. And I think that's a real important thing, and we would like that relatively soon, but when I talked to the chair, some people weren't, some departments weren't meeting for as long as 3 weeks. So I think our date was the 31st, October 31st, to get that back to us. And we would like to get that input because the bottom line is we don't want to be a committee of, I don't know how many people are on there, it's about 20 and possibly 21. And then we're also going to add as many as 4 students onto this because Brittany represented students in our first meeting, and it was so refreshing to hear what she had to say, because it is a different perspective that we wanted more of that perspective, and different ones just than Brittany doing it. So we asked, we have 1 other student in mind, and we're looking for 2 other ones. And then in addition, we would like some representation from other people on campus that have some kind of tie-in, like admissions or things. You know, the other places beside faculty that are doing things with our gen ed and talking about. I think we have to pay close attention to the transfer models and things like that as we move forward, but we want to get some input from various different people on what's working and what's not as we move forward. And part of that is because we want this to be from all of us as opposed from the few of us. And we don't want to go down that road where, you know, I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. But as Kemble says, that's what, the 3rd or 4th one that you've gone through.
Oh, yeah.
And
Been here one time.
is there, yeah, it just shows you how old you are, right? No, it's the idea that if we're gonna go through this again, we should do this methodically and intentionally, and I think that's what we're trying to do going forward. And at this point, I take any questions. I think that's pretty much all I want to say.
Any questions for Dave? Just a reminder, when you are having discussions in your programs, please look at the prompt. Don't just send like, we need a class in this skill, look at the outcomes, respond to the outcomes. We're not getting to models yet, we're not getting to classes yet, we're talking about these learning goals. So please do discuss those. We will have plenty of time to talk about classes and models
Yeah,
later.
and names of whether it's gen ed or university studies or something else. We're not down there yet. We're kind of building our way up. So give us our foundation rocks.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Dale.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that gives us some extra time for our next item. Paul volunteered to sort of be in the hot seat, but I see a number of other people who were involved in this. Over the summer, Sue invited a number of faculty to look into faculty awards, and that group wrote a report that you have all taken a look at. Paul, you can kick off. Anything you want to say about that before we take questions?
Sure. So I'll try to keep this, I think, to the highlights because it's there and you can read the details. But we wanted to just thank Provost Walsh for bringing this group together. I think every one of us felt encouraged by the dialogue and just opening up the conversation. So we met for 4 hours. I don't remember the dates. Maybe it was end of August, mid-August.
Middle to end. Yeah.
And then we split up and did some of our own independent work, and then we came back together in early September and talked for another 4 hours. So it was a pretty extensive conversation. We really talked about a lot. You can see in the report. And we were tasked with, I think generally the goal was to have an open-ended conversation about really anything we wanted to. What are some current trends in higher education, our experiences as faculty at SOU, and looking at research that other universities have done on reward systems and what we would like to see. So it was really a faculty-driven project. 2 general themes came up. The first was equity in work. And there's a lot of discussion about recognizing invisible work, especially around mentoring students and community work that maybe doesn't get as well as recognized. And then we also talked a lot about job satisfaction, how we as faculty would like to see the university really engage in celebrating and promoting faculty success and engaging the faculty as partners who are integral to the success of the institution. And so those were the 2 high-level categories that guided our conversation. And we then focused our report on 4 main stressors that we think could be, addressed by making some changes to the way the faculty reward system is done, or making some additions to the reward system. And as Andrew noted, some of these are CBA related, some of these are bylaws related, so it's important just to keep that in mind. The first stressor is what the group called time poverty, so just a sense of feeling burned out, not having enough time to do all the kinds of tasks that we would like to do. A lot of faculty do go above and beyond sort of the minimum expectation, and so there's difficulty in being able to do everything we want to do. One of the problems is that a lot of work goes unreported and unrecognized, and it seems that this is not something that's unique to SOU. This is really a challenge across higher education in general. So the solution that we're suggesting is to transparently recognize diversity of service, transparency with program and division service assignments. One of the items that we've seen other universities use is kind of a dashboard where people's service activities are sort of made public in a way, or transparent within programs and within divisions. And one thing that we talked about as a group, if we were to add something like this, it would be really critical that it's not another kind of activity that's imposed on faculty. So it can't be a second FBAR activity. It would have to be something that's seamlessly integrated into what we're already doing. Because it's supposed to help with the time poverty issue, right? There were some suggestions to consider changing bylaws to recognize different kinds of service. So the idea of mentoring faculty, or mentoring students, or mentoring junior faculty. And this is an issue when you bring in conversations about identities that faculties hold, minorities, or different identities might require different kinds of mentorship or community activity, and that should be recognized by the bylaws as a type of service. There was also suggestions to perhaps limit the frequency of FBAR, so after somebody's achieved tenure and promotion, maybe the frequency of completing an FBAR should go down. There's some other items in there, but I'll go ahead and move on to the next big category. The second stressor was inadequate compensation and support. So I think this is, pretty major CBA item, so I don't need to get into it in too much detail, but we, in addition to increase in pay, some other ideas are merit-based pay, better sabbatical pay, monetary support for scholarship, as well as support for new faculty. So we talked a lot about how some of the challenges that new faculty face in coming to SOU, being on the quarter system, not getting paid until October. So there were suggestions of doing like a kind of bridge program to support new faculty. Another big item was better incentivizing taking the role of program chair. And the interesting thing here is I think a lot of these issues aren't just one category. So we're saying this is stressor 2, inadequate compensation. I think this is also related to the time, poverty, and equity of work. It may be that people are resistant to step into these kinds of service roles because there's a perceived lack of support or lack of incentive for doing those roles. So that was a big topic for us. Stressor 3 is poor recognition of faculty success. And this came up in many conversations across our 2 meetings. There's a general feeling and sense that scholarship is undervalued or underfunded. Faculty engage in a lot of scholarship and a lot of creative work and also a lot of teaching innovations on campus. And it's felt that those aren't well marketed or celebrated. And this isn't only a matter of job satisfaction for faculty, but we talked about how it's also a sense of community building and recruitment and also retention. So just a simple work of having the marketing department create stories on the SOU website that could be publicized on social media, that's going to end up in front of students and in front of community partners, and that would be a way to celebrate the faculty work. So our solution or our suggestion is that, and we also, a point that we want to emphasize here is this shouldn't be a faculty-driven project. Faculty currently feel a lot of pressure if they want to promote their work. It has to be a self-promotional kind of thing. There are some faculty rewards, but those are faculty nominated. So we're requesting the administration to really find ways to celebrate the faculty work and share it publicly. So some of the things, like some examples, recognizing accomplishments inwardly to campus, so simply sending out emails when faculty do things to really celebrate that. Encourage the marketing department to engage in more proactive campaigns. There was some discussion of things like a distinguished lecture series open to the public. We currently have the campus theme program that Prakash and Justin do, but maybe something a little bit high profile to really bring the campus together and get conversations going across disciplines as a way to build community. So there's a few other examples, but I think I'll leave it at that for now on that category. Stressor 4 then is absence of community. And I think that this again is interrelated to time poverty and just people being stretched thin. It makes it hard for people to come together and have that kind of community spirit. So here again, trying to incentivize work that brings together interdisciplinary kind of dialogue. And I think there were similar examples here, like invited lecture series, distinguished professor awards, more meaningful PD opportunities. I think the work that Clay is doing with, how do you say, CATL? Is this a new center?
CATL, yeah.
CATL. So I think the work that Clay is doing is actually going to help with this too, having really meaningful opportunities for faculty to come together around teaching issues and other kinds of things. And I think the work that Kylan is doing with the Writing Center is also in this direction. So we're seeing that happen, but we're just in this report encouraging more of that. We also wanted to note some things that we have actually found really helpful, that have worked really well. We all agreed that the Student Success Coordinators has been a really great program for helping remove some of the work off of faculty onto staff, work that staff can do, so it's freeing up our time to be able to engage in scholarship and creative teaching programs and teaching innovations. So we're encouraging more kinds of things like that, and the IT coordinators is another example that's been really great. So that's the gist of the report. I'm happy to share more about like how the process worked or answer any questions that anyone has. And again, thank you for putting this together. It was really, I think, appreciated and a valuable process.
Well, thank you. The work was wonderful, and I couldn't have asked for more thoughtful deliberation, so thank you. It was great. Good for me, too.
Any questions?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
First, are there next steps involved with the things that are more maybe Senate related than CBA related? Or?
Well, what I did do was share it with the chairs and directors of the workshop, so they've had a chance to think and talk about it. And I think there are probably several paths, not necessarily one linear path. So I think we're just going to think that through a little bit. I haven't talked to the directors as a follow-up yet, but I think that there are some easy things that we can do and then some more challenging things that we need a little more time and process.
I mean, some of these things also, kind of intersect with several things that are coming.
So we wanted to be very clear that we're not trying to make more work for faculty, because that's part of the problem.
Well, that's how we read it, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So the goal would be to use that resource in a way to support some of the other work that we're recommending.
Right, and then some of the other, like the recommendations for digital commons and features, and those are great resources. Those would require substantial financial and staffing resource to migrate again over something like that. So we don't know how much the task force was committed to something like that, but it didn't, to us it sounded like, hey, we have this brand new thing that we spent all this time on. We'd love to get faculty to look at it and see if they would like to upload things. We also are looking at acquiring something that could make digital, like sort of exhibitions possible, but again, that would take, have to be in partnership with the faculty who are creating these things. It couldn't be like coming from the library solely, because it would be too much for our very overstretched staff already, who, I mean, like our promotions department is like half of one person.
Yeah.
So that would be really hard, but we would love to work with faculty to acquire more things, because I looked through what we have now, and it's, a lot of the things are from library faculty. And then there's a few other individual faculty who have loaded several things to the IR, but it's overall not representative of our campus. So we would love to have more things in the IR, but we definitely need help getting with that.
So we need to spread the word that that's a resource that people
Yeah, and that
can
we have
access.
this beautiful new interface that people put a ton of work into making it really clean and navigable and all of that. It's great new software and platform, but it's not, maybe people don't realize that it's not the clunky old one we used to have.
Any other questions or comments?
I appreciate, how all the suggestions you've made in here, and I think some of them are, easier to implement than others, obviously. Not the least of which is the faculty reward for scholarship that we talked about here in the Senate that I think Provost supports.
Literally.
Yeah. At least last year she did, it's public information. I'm wondering how you got to the point of, say, what the problems were. Did you conduct a survey survey of faculty at some point that, in order to identify like what was needed to be improved, or?
We didn't do a formal survey, but we spent a lot of time talking about what our perceptions are based on our own experiences, the people on the task or on the ad hoc group, and then also based on our relationships with other faculty that we know. I also would add that from Provost Wall's direction, the goal was really not to hold anything back, to sort of think as big as we could in terms of not sort of worrying about what the challenges would be in trying to achieve some of these outcomes, but just sort of thinking about what could we do, both low-hanging fruit and then also bigger picture issues that would be nice for us to have conversations around. So that was another part of the context for the conversation in the report. So yes, I think it's true that obviously some of these things are going to be easier to implement and others are going to be much more challenging. We did talk about the faculty scholarship reward, and one of the points there was that that's a faculty to faculty thing. And that's great, but we would like, part of the issue of job satisfaction and campus culture is asking administration to help out with some of that work of celebrating what the faculty are doing.
Yeah, okay. But going back to the, say, the representation of the committee, you know, do you feel like looking at that, if you're basically polling the people in your committee about what needs to be done or what problems to address, do you think, were you comfortable with the representation on that group on behalf of the whole faculty?
Dennis, can I chime in on
And how did it
just
come
one
about?
comment there?
Yeah, how did it come about?
Yeah, so Sue sent out a call to, for participation on, it was originally the chairs and directors, is that right?
No, I actually tried to think of a cross-section of folks who either had just been here a little while or had been here longer, some of whom had been chairs or were chairs. So I tried to spread it out over a broad range of folks. I put out a call to about 15 people and ended up with about 8 or 9.
Those were all the people who actually said they
Who
were
were able to be
during the
here and
summer.
Okay, so it
physically
came
present.
from some.
Yeah.
And we zoomed some people in.
Yeah.
Right, and it was a summer task force, so
Yeah.
I think, I don't think the aim was to be comprehensively representative in that work. You know, I think we all knew that a survey in the summer wasn't gonna get any kind of response. And so it was a, what can we come up with right now? So this is very much a first step.
We can build on the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend. It's not that I disagree with like a lot of the ideas or even some of the way it's been framed out. Maybe the problems might be different, you know, if a larger pool of faculty had an opportunity to respond to that.
Well, I would recommend you have it, and you can take it back to your chair or director and have a nice program conversation about it.
Sure.
And then weigh in where things don't seem as quite square or are missing.
Andrew, I just wanted to say, I'd love to have stories on faculty work that you're doing for marketing. One of the things we're trying to emphasize more is academic excellence. We believe that that is something that's been missing in our marketing in the past. We've kind of focused on making students feel comfortable, and we want to kind of move back the other direction a little bit with what a high quality group we have here for students to come and study with. So anytime you have something that you want emphasized, send it to Sue, send it to me, send it to Nicole in marketing, copy it to me so I know and can follow up and push on that. So, they have limited staffing like everybody else, but if we know that we've got a line of stories, then I'm happy to push and say, hey, can we get this one done this month? And so feed us information and we'll try to get it out there.
Thank you.
So what's the next step for this group or this?
The group is done.
Oh.
I asked them to do a very specific thing, which is to identify some of the issues that Paul talked about for the reasons that he talked about. And so I don't know what the next step is. I think that, I've thought a bit about it. I want to talk to the directors and I want to talk to the president and just spread spread it out a little more, beyond the group that did the initial task.
Okay, I was just curious because something Andrew just said by saying this is just the beginning. Then
Well-
I'm wondering, well, what's the next step?
Sure.
So, yeah, part of it was bringing it to Senate, right? You know, not all of these things have to do with the Senate. Some belong to the union, and the union is allowed to go do with what they want to there. But we're the Senate, right? So some of the things like what we want to do with FPARs or what other kinds of, you know, what changes we might want to make to service requirements for tenure and promotion, that's our call, right? So I want to make sure it gets out to senators, you all take it back to your programs, and, you know, talk about these issues about what are the things that you would like to be Senate priorities that we can tackle this year. I mean, there are things that we can do right away if we want to, right? So I think the next step is really for all of us to bring this back to people we represent and say, you know, what do you see in here that we can act upon?
So we could take this back to our programs, and then we could establish another committee or something to continue, like, some of the things that are important maybe for this group, based on this report. Would that be something that
Well, is your report,
you would agree with?
Can I respond to what Dennis is saying? I think as a person who was part of this group, I would actually love to hear what your thoughts are in terms of what it might be missing that we didn't capture. I think that would be a really valuable conversation. So, I mean, I think taking it back to programs and bringing it back here, or just facilitating dialogue wherever it occurs, is going to be valuable.
So you were on the group, Andrew was on the group, Alina was on the group, and maybe we can keep a little subset in place, or figure out a way to communicate that, so that you don't have to be the lead person necessarily on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping that comes out of this, because like when we talked about the scholarship award from the provost office, I mean, it was very complicated with what, based on the work that has been done in the past. Not for you, not for
Those
you, for
awards
faculty.
don't come out of my office, they actually are faculty-led, we have a faculty development committee.
So that was a whole faculty
Yeah.
process that is sort of like unknown, and unless we kind of like make it visible, maybe nothing gets done for a while.
So we are over time, but somebody had her
I
hand up.
just want to make sure, is the report available so that we can access it? Is it on?
It's in the drive.
In the drive.
Yeah.
Yep, it's in the drive. All right, we are going to move forward, and I'm sure we will come back to many of these items in the future. But we need to go on to the student evaluation redesign next steps. So as you all recall, Melissa's group came forward at the second to last Senate meeting in the spring and presented a pretty extensive report to Senate. A lot of great work in that report. It has been with you all summer long, and I'm sure you just read over it several times. But we want to keep working on that, because at least two things need to happen if we are going to take any of the recommendations of that group. One is to create a new evaluation implement, and the other is to change our bylaws, because the current bylaws do not align at all with the recommendations of that task force. And in order to do that, we felt that we probably need to reconstitute some form of that task force, maybe not the exact same group, because the same people might not all be available. But we did draft a little charge for a sort of a second version of the task force, which you have the language there. Happy to entertain any potential amendments to that charge if you want to consider it. But basically, do we have any thoughts about moving forward with this process?
I only wonder that, two people would be way too few, I think. I think just because of the things that emerged out of the report, 4 would be probably the minimum.
So 4 faculty?
4 to 5, maybe. What do you think, Christina?
Well, we had more than that, but not everybody kind of
Right.
stuck with
Yeah.
it the entire time. So I would say start bigger in case people have to drop out or
And just because this, I mean, part of it was to have some questions that are campus-wide, I just feel like 2 people is just not enough.
No.
Also, Matt Stillman reached out and asked if he could also be ex officio, and it was after this had already gone out to everyone, so I wanted to sort of make sure no one thought that was odd, but he was on the original task force. Yeah.
He wasn't on the task force, but he did meet with us, and he was very helpful, I thought.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So any objections to just adding in the register role? So any other comments on the report or the charge?
Are you gonna just send out an email asking for volunteers like the first time?
That was what I was planning.
Are you gonna have a preference if the same people would like to do it, or do you want new blood in there?
I feel like it would be helpful to have as many of the same people as possible because we did all the research and that was really shaping, you know, the direction. But that is also why I didn't want to make it too small, right? Because then, I mean, if we have 4 people who want to continue and that's everybody, then we don't have room for anybody new.
I'm not averse to new people though, I mean, I think.
Oh, I'm not either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would like to have at least some who were on it before.
Yeah, I agree.
Because otherwise it's kind of gonna be like starting all over again.
Would there be too many?
I mean,
I'm
like
asking.
too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, if we put out an email and 7 people want to be involved, 4 of which were already there last year, and 3 that now want to participate and have a say in the new model. So the previous task force was doing all the research, and I'm not volunteering myself, but now it's okay, now we're gonna actually have something substantial to move forward, and I want to be a part of that. So I see on here that you would be the chair of that, and so if I send this back to my constituents and say, hey, we're looking for old volunteers that already served and new, would the Senate be open to having, 4 to 8 plus you, so, 9 total? I mean, these numbers are arbitrary until we see how many people are
Right, well, I
volunteering,
was gonna
but-
say, that sounds like a very optimistic.
I know when
That's what we started
When the
with,
first task
though.
force came
12
out.
volunteers.
We have a lot of committees and task forces going
I
on.
remember Allison jumped at it, tried to jump on there, so.
Right, and she is interested but will not be available because she'll be on her Fulbright, so, yeah.
And I'm sure, again, we will make sure that this process circulates through all the different programs. So we're gonna need a lot of input on whatever ends up coming out. Brittany, have your hand up.
Yeah, just because I was on the committee last year, I remember some of our discussion was also around possibilities of having like the course evaluations also be maybe specific towards the divisions. I personally, as a student, I also understand like quorum and it's hard to get people there all the time. Would like more people on it when we're having those conversations about division specific questions. I think the more the merrier when we're now getting into the process of actually developing the course evaluation. When our research was like, we had a couple people looking at the research, and I think now we should grow the committee from my perspective of it.
Right, we have a lot of people looking at the research, but yeah, I agree with you, Brittany. And I don't think that anyone planned for the new task force to write the program or division specific questions. It was more that there would be a place for those that then programs could develop their own. It's more the campus-wide questions that would need to be developed by the committee. But I agree that having nice representation would be helpful.
So how about if I we'll ask for at least 4. We just leave the
Leave it
cap
open.
and no cap. For at least 4 faculty volunteers.
Plus you, Brett.
I'm committed out.
Any other comments on this charge as it appears?
I guess I will, maybe it's implicit in number 2, but when you're doing something that's this big, because it has real serious repercussions for faculty evaluation, career track, and so on, it seems like we should at least make a little more explicit that there's a sense of how we transition. Because if people have been working on one set of rules for 4 years, let's say, all of a sudden they're up for promotion and the rules all change. Now, crap, I used to be outstanding, and now I'm barely adequate or whatever. So I don't know, maybe that's just, maybe we should say with, you know, comma with a view to a transition plan or something like that. I'm just concerned, our poor personnel committees have occasionally been in really hot water, through no fault of their own, this kind of thing.
And that might be worthy of a third bullet of, consider.
Yeah.
Recommend a transition plan or something like that.
I wonder if we could see how the two new sets of questions universities would correlate by having both simultaneously or something like that, just to see how they line up.
We could, but our original questions had not been validated, like what the universities are using or not is not validated, so.
Well, students will definitely, like, there's the, getting students to do both would be challenging, I think.
This is so cool.
What about?
I'm watching this appear here, it's very
Oh,
creepy.
what about simply identify transition issues for Senate to consider before approval?
That might be
And that way it allows, it gives us the flexibility of seeing, all right, is this something that we need additional?
That's a good idea,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
Works. Any other thoughts? So, I don't know that there needs to be a rush on this. I don't know if we want to send this all out and revisit in 2 weeks unless there's any kind of eagerness to waive a 2-week rule or anything like that, or what do you all think?
No reason.
No reason, all right. So please take this back to your programs and ask if there's anything else we want to consider before voting on this, and I will put it on there for a possible vote at our next Senate meeting. All good? All right. Well, we are just mowing through the schedule. Any announcements or new business? Brittany?
I was just gonna do like an ASSU report.
Absolutely.
Okay. So just an update to tomorrow, ASSU, which hopefully you all know is our student government year. We are having our all ASSU meeting we're gonna be changing our bylaws to hopefully completely transform our student fee process, which if any of you have ever been involved in our student fee process is historically a mess. So this is a really big step for us and we're really excited. And we work really closely with past financial directors for ASSU as well as Jason Katz to put out a bylaws that is one, legal in the state of Oregon and actually goes with the codes which we're supposed to be aligning with, while also just trying to fix some of our past errors in the process. So hopefully that passes with the body tomorrow. Also, we just had our retreat and all of our members were working on just talking about issues that students identify on campus that they really want to work on this year, and on week 4 we'll be voting on those as our all ASSU issues. I know one that is really big that everyone's really in line with is having an ad hoc this year to address some of the concerns with our international students and some complications they may face here, which would also go along with we're doing a push to bring more international students to Southern Oregon University. This is a good committee to help prepare for them when they get here, that they are satisfied and fix some of these problems that they face. Just so you all know, some of you who are chairs of the faculty senate committees, I this summer prepared our committee and our ASSU members to be ready to be sat on your committees. So whenever you get them up and running, I will forward those to Andrew when they're approved, and you can put a student on all of your committees. And if you have times, I would email them in advance to just tell them this is when we're meeting, these are the days, and if they can't make them, I will switch the student and make sure a student is on there, because I would love to have representation there. Just so you all know, in case you wanted to advertise any of your students, I would love this advertised. We have an event next week Tuesday, it's called Affordability Fair. If you've seen the posters around the campus, it's got a little Instagram on it. It's basically just a big event to showcase the students resources that are either free to them on campus or they already paid for with their incidental fee, and just telling them to come use them, please. So we have like all the resource centers, the food pantry, we have Access, if you know what Access is in Medford, they will be here. We also have Health and Wellness Center. We found one of those hidden line item budgets to give this year some free STI, HIV testing, as well as flu shots, as well as medical testing to then be approved by DR to receive those resources. So we will be waiving all of those fees this year through an executive order from ASSU. informing students again of our tuition setting process and why tuition does increase ahead of time before we potentially get there again this year. Also, we have ASSU like childcare subsidy, tech share, and the lawyer that we fund here through student government, and a bunch of others. So it's a big event to showcase all of the resources on campus, and hopefully your students will be there, so when they're battling costs of rising tuition, we can help decrease other costs they may have to face.
Brittany, remember that there's a TAC website on the president's page, and you might just mention that, because it's got all the documentation from the last process, so it's kind of a good repository for information.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Do you have the Student Recreation Center show up there?
I don't have them right now, but I can easily get them.
Because the students are paying for that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Some of them don't know that.
Yeah, I can definitely invite them there.
And it would be a good, healthy choice for them.
Brittany, so I've gotten out of the habit of always having an ASSO report because
Yeah.
they weren't showing up.
I know,
Do you want me to put that as a standing, or do you want to just let me know when you want to? Okay, okay. All right. Come back on with some type pressure. Very good. Any other announcements or new business?
You know, in the spirit of faculty rewards, I'm really impressed with the amount of work that went into these documents that we're looking at here. And sometimes people pour their hearts into this, and I just want to say thank you for this really good work. Not that there's not stuff to do, but this is very thoughtful, engaging, important, and so thank you.
Any other announcements or new business?
I had a question on it. So, did I hear that right, that there will be student representatives on the Senate committees, or?
Yes, in the bylaws, there are several, not all of the committees, but several of the committees have student representatives. So I know curriculum, I think university studies, and a few others. And sometimes it's difficult to fill those because there's been kind of poor communication between like getting the chairs to tell the student government when they're meeting, and then finding the student who can meet at that time. But hopefully this is going to be the year we nail it. Chad?
We're going to talk about a fun expedition we had with the graduate students. Led a group of 12 graduate students to the Balkans, where the Balkans have, in the 90s experienced a lot of turmoil, and a new trail was built there called the Via Dinarica. And the idea is to connect the Balkans naturally. And it's a trail that goes from Slovenia all the way down to Albania. It's 800 miles long. It's one of the newest mega trails in the world. And it was promoted by National Geographic and Outside Magazine. And the United Nations and USA put together a trail. And we went and assessed it. And so we assessed all 800 miles of it, compiled a bunch of data, and we're in the process of putting that stuff together. But it was an amazing 39-day expedition. We actually stepped foot on all 800 miles of it, which was pretty awesome. And it redefined, in my opinion, what a trail is. When we were sitting in the middle of nothing, and there's a Gaia track showing us where to go, a GPX track, but it's pretty amazing. So we'll be compiling that data and using it to talk about the things that we saw in the Balkans. And pretty amazing to see people that their grandfathers were sheep herders, for example, and they want to live in a village called Lukomir. It's the highest village in the Balkans, and they can't because they don't want to be sheep herders. Well, they can now because they built a trail. And now 300 people went through that village, and this person was able to give a room to them at night. So it's really talking about how these trails are connecting these areas, and we're going to tell that story.
Please look for the email that I sent out this morning for the call for nominees for both faculty, teaching, and service awards. Last year, there were not a ton of nominees, and so now part of that was probably because everyone forgot this was a thing, and the call for nominees came out at the end of the term instead of the start. So,
and it's a complicated process.
It is a complicated process, and it is a lot of work for both the people being awarded and those reviewing. But please do, if you want to nominate one of your colleagues, or you can self-nominate as well. Please see that information in your mailbox. Yes.
So one of the
task force the Senate has is the Senate FPAR task force, which I'm a part of, and you should have gotten an email from me asking for your thoughts, so I think that is due. Joe McBee is the chair of that. I believe that we're hoping for feedback by this Friday.
The survey.
The survey, yes.
And then selfishly, I'm going to make one other announcement because last year we had a number of programs come back and report to Senate how they're doing. So I thought I would let you all know that the new digital cinema major, which launched this year, has already surpassed our enrollment goals by 4 students. And if you are seeing a movie in the next 2.5 months at either Ashland Street Cinema or the Varsity Theater, you look for our promo. The Coming Attractions Theaters has donated screen time, so an entirely student-made promotional video will be screening for the next 2.5 months in all 18 locations in 4 states. So if you go to the movies, let me see if you see it. Let me know if you see it.
Brian reminded me, I'm on the other task force, as is Dennis, on the post-tenure and post-promotion review committee. We're a little lower key on our technology, but Dustin Walter is leading our group, and he sent out something to all of the chairs, which is essentially similar to what, actually the same questions that we had asked of the division directors who came and reported to us, the Senate last spring, I think it was. And so, anyway, encourage you, if you're a chair or to bug your chair, to reply to those, because we also would like to get our work done. Both of these task forces are supposed to report to the Senate by the end of this quarter, and I think our group feels like we'll be ready to do that.
So will ours.
Up to Annie there.
The race is on. Any other announcements? Thank you very much. Adjourned.